The word hero has many definitions. It first referred to a demigod for the Greeks of old, to an illustrious man of divine descent in ancient Rome, and to a man of superhuman strength or great physical courage in Old French. Ryland Grace rejects all of these definitions. He does not see himself as a man who exhibits great bravery, nor does he think himself as a key figure. And yet, everyone else around him sees those qualities. They see the reluctant hero he will become and the potential he is blind to. That is precisely why Ryland Grace made for such a compelling hero. He was not perfect, but he was human. That rawness, lingering self-doubt, quest for identity, all merging into this sense of direction is what I want to talk about today. This video is going to be structured into two parts. First, the analysis and character psychology of Dr. Ryland Grace. And second, the takeaways we can apply in our own lives. When I walked into the movie theater on Monday, I did not know what to expect. I had not read the book. I did not watch the trailer. I barely even glanced at the synopsis and just knew Ryan Gosling was in the movie. Trusted it would be good just by virtue of him being an actor in it. Therefore, my review or commentary is going to differ from other channels by virtue of me going in blind. And boy oh boy, am I so glad I went in completely unaware of what was waiting for me. Project Hail Mary is the most moving, if not the best movie I have ever seen. I could rave about the music, the shots, the editing, the pacing, but that is not my lane. Character analysis, mental health, and personal development is. And this movie is psychological gold. The audience learns who Ryland Grace, the protagonist, is as he himself is piecing it all back together. Dr. Grace wakes up not remembering anything about his own identity. He has retained some knowledge of what he used to know, but no information whatsoever as to indicate who he is. The most impactful moment at the very beginning of the movie is the moment when he discovers he is not anywhere close to Earth and that he has no way of coming back home. This moment was especially poignant because of how it was shot and how it was edited. All of the sound was cut off as Dr. Grace broke down emotionally and physically due to this revelation. It takes a while for him to get back up on his feet, but I find that it is really interesting and really telling that one of the first things he does after he is able to somewhat accept the situation he is in, even though he has no idea as to why he is part of this mission, is to properly send off the other two people who were sent on the mission with him. He gives a speech at their funeral that he is arranging by himself with a lot of dignity. And one of the things he says is very indicative to who he is as a person, because he says, and forgive me for not quoting him properly, but I don't have access to the movie. This is all fresh off my mind. You didn't deserve this. You look like a good person, a fun person, people with family and friends. You did not deserve to die. Why were you the one to die? I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that he has survival guilt. He is the only one left going on a mission, surviving by himself, whereas two people who looked like they were loved and who looked like had people waiting for them, even though it is clear that there was no way back to Earth, those people died. Ryland Grace, even though he doesn't have access to a lot of his memory at this point in time, can measure their lives against his, in the sense that he sees how loved they were and how little information he has of himself. It makes him think that he is unworthy to be the one still standing compared to these two people who he does not remember. That is only the beginning of this survivor's guilt, this I don't deserve this mentality. Why was I the one chosen? There are other people who are better, stronger, smarter than I am, more heroic type of thinking. To further reinforce how morally sound his character is and what his insecurities are, Dr. Grace remembers very early memories that are tied to this mission, where government officials come looking for him because of a paper he wrote. He gives his assistance in analyzing the parasite, and what he finds undermines everything he had ever believed in terms of how he thought science worked. He himself uncovered proof that directly undermines his theory, his paper, and the entire reason why he was dismissed from the scientific and academic community, and the entire reason why the government asked for his help. This is a moment where everything falls apart for him, because the research and the theories that he has are proven to be completely incorrect. But what Dr. Grace decides to do in that moment, instead of wallowing into this despair and disappointment and anger and a whole cocktail of negative feelings that he is feeling because of this ego death that he's experiencing, is to offer his help instead and volunteer to help the team with discovering more information about this parasite. This is indicative to who he is as a person, that his first reaction after having his entire world completely rearranged is to volunteer his help and prioritize other people instead of focusing on himself and the terrible day that he is having. He ends up figuring out why the parasites are there, why they are actually putting the whole world into danger, and this reason being that they are actually reproducing. He officially gets the green light to be fully part of this project and help on the science side of things people who are going to live on a mission to find out more about why in a certain system their star is not dying. This is when Dr. Grace first realizes that this mission is a one-way only mission. The participants are being asked to die, and to die far away from home, far away from all of the people that they know and that they love, to save humanity. And this is a concept that he struggles with, because he finds this sacrifice those people are making to be incredibly heroic, and he admires that they can do this, that they have this bravery, because he thinks he is lacking that quality himself. After that flashback, back in the present to where Dr. Grace is very much in space and gets to the very system we just mentioned, he realizes that he is not alone. There is another life form, an alien, that is, I think the planet is called Iridian. I'm not too sure. My memory of the terms of this movie is quite limited, so bear with me. But he meets another person, an alien, who, just like him, is alone. There are two survivors of their kind who has been sent on this mission, and what is really telling again of Dr. Grace's character is how likable, humble, compassionate and good he is as a human being, because of how much time and how much effort he puts into learning how to communicate with his new alien friend that he calls Rocky. Even the fact that he entertained having communication with another life form, even though he was terrified. And this is a recurrent theme, where Dr. Grace is terrified of something, does it anyway, but still, in his own mind, all of this does not register as bravery, even though courage is doing what needs to be done, even though one is afraid. Teaming up with Rocky brings up a lot of interesting themes for Dr. Grace, one of which is connection. This is something he somewhat already knew from the brief memories that he regained, which is that he did not really have friends, he did not really have family. He was someone that was already very alone, way before he was sent on this mission, and way before he was a sole survivor, and then meeting Rocky. Rocky talks about his mate, his other half. This is something that we can see really affects Dr. Grace, especially when Rocky asks about it. Dr. Grace sees just how lonely of an existence he has been, and he is very grateful that his last moments are spent with a friend. It only took him to go all the way across space to really connect with someone here, case in point being Rocky, his alien friend. What is really interesting about their entire interaction is how Grace does not tell Rocky and lets him believe, in fact, that both of them accomplishing this mission, saving their respective people and planets before going home, is actually something that is going to happen. Dr. Grace knows very well that there is no way home for him. He knows it's a one-way only mission. And yet, he deliberately keeps this fact from Rocky to spare him from further grief of having lost his crewmates. That is something only someone truly kind can do. Eventually, Dr. Grace remembers how he was roped into this mission, and that was all because of an accident with the team that was actually being trained to go. Only two of the original crew members that were supposed to go are still there and were spared from this explosion. And the missing member of the team is the scientist, the biologist. In that moment, during this meeting where they're talking about what to do, as the mission is imminently ready and they're only missing one member, everyone swivels around and looks at Grace. He is in disbelief because he is like, surely you're not talking about me, right? I have no training, I am not qualified, etc, etc. I'm not brave. Did you notice how his arguments against going into this mission was not, I don't want to help people, or I don't want to save humanity, but they lean more towards the, I am not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not competent enough, I wasn't trained for this, I am insufficient, I am going to screw up this mission. We of course don't know exactly then how he agreed to this mission, because we're brought back to Dr. Grace's present, where he and Rocky are trying to get a sample from the clouds of the planet Adrian, I think was her name. I believe it is. Do correct me if it's not in the comments. Once again, Dr. Grace, who is the first to think of himself as a coward or an incompetent individual who is not smart, who is not this, who is not that. He could have saved his life and gone back into their ship, or rocket, I don't know how you call this, I think it's more of a ship, into their spaceship and tried again, as Rocky advised. But instead, he chose to put his life at risk to get that sample and return it to the spaceship. The moments after this, of course, both of them nearly died. I cried my eyes out at this moment because I really thought either of them were going to die. Again, I went in blind, so I did not know at all if that was potentially a thing. Thankfully, none of my worst fears or worries happened. And it was during he was blacked out that Dr. Grace finally got this final piece of the puzzle, which was he never volunteered for this mission. He was literally dragged into it against his will because there was nobody else, and he was humanity's only hope. Let's rewind a little bit. The only reason he is here is because of an accident that happened during training. He did not volunteer. He is being put into a position and a role that he did not want to be in. He was forced into a position that required him to do things he did not think himself capable of doing. And he showed up. Despite thinking the worst of himself, he actually showed up. He proved all of those people who actually believed he would be capable of saving humanity. Think on that a little bit. Once Rocky and Dr. Grace get their sample, realize that they were correct in assuming there was a predator that was eating this parasite that they desperately need to get rid of to save their respective planets. Then they managed to get a bigger number and to have them reproduce. So comes the time where they need to part ways. It is an incredibly emotional time, and I forgot to mention it, but if you're watching me you already know, Rocky actually decided to give some of his fuel to Dr. Grace so that he can come home. And though it makes Rocky's trip longer, it still allows Grace to go back to Earth, which is something he had not thought he would ever be able to do. He had actually come to accept and be content with sacrificing himself so that everybody else could live. It is quite a heavy truth to accept, and even more so to be able to be content with his own passing. But again, Rocky was able to come in clutch and help him out, and so both of the friends part ways. But that is not the end, because Grace figures out that the predator that they need to bring back to their own planets to get rid of the parasite problem they're having. I speak of it as like a small problem. No, actually their planets are basically gonna, all life is gonna die. But, Dr. Grace realizes that these predators are eating xenon, which is what Rocky's entire ship is made of. Which means that not only are they going to escape, eat his entire ship, but Rocky is going to die way before he even reaches his home planet in excruciating pain. And that is a fate worse than death itself. Grace finds himself in a terrible dilemma because he has managed to contain these parasites within his own ship. He has gone too far already that if he chooses to turn back around and warn Rocky, he inevitably will not be able to ever go back to Earth. His two choices are either going back home to Earth, his home planet, but knowing that in doing so, his best friend at this point and his best friend's entire planet will die, or he can choose to go after Rocky and warn him, but in which case he will be unable to return to Earth. The stakes that he is dealing with are astronomically high. Yes, the pun is intended. In either scenario, he is the one who is going to be hurt. He is the one who is going to lose. He either loses his best friend and has on his conscience the extinction of an entire race, or he gives up on his future of his potential life back on Earth. The choice he makes ends up making his character shine through. The real kindness, compassion, and bravery that he is made of. It is not when things are easy that one proves oneself, but when things are hard and one has to choose which of two very difficult situations one can live with. And Ryland Grace proved his character with the choice he made, which was to give up on his life on Earth and to save his best friend and his best friend's entire planet instead. Ryland Grace did not want to be a hero. He did not think of himself as heroic, even to the end. And yet, when push comes to shove, he made hard choices and rose up to the occasion every single time. His thoughts may betray him, but his actions speak louder than they ever could. Ryland Grace was a hero, albeit a reluctant one. Now that we have gone through Dr. Ryland Grace analysis, let us switch perspective and see how his story also applies to you. Okay. Funky glasses on, and now let us get into it. First things first, the reluctant hero. Ryland Grace's circumstances were shit, through no fault of his own. A lot of us also have very shit circumstances, and through no fault of our own either. And yes, it is unfair. Yes, it is painful. But is it something that we want to accept as reality? Or do we want a better life for ourselves, a better outcome for ourselves? Because we would be completely justified to wallow in misery. And Ryland Grace definitely was put into a situation where he could have just focused on all that was going wrong, on the fact that he was going to die in that spaceship, at least to his knowing. But no, that's not what he did. He stood back up, and so can we. Life is hard. Situations, environment can be shit. But the only one at the end of the day who's really going to change our life is ourselves. And we need to figure out how we're going to get out of these circumstances, how we can improve upon our circumstances. Feel me? Information number 2 that I want to talk about. What's really interesting in Ryland Grace that also applies to people is the difference between self-perception and actual character. Ryland Grace is convinced he is not a hero. He is not brave, he's not heroic, he's not this, he's not that. But when you really watch the movie, what you see is that despite him having no belief whatsoever in himself of how good of a person he actually is, his actions say otherwise. He always rises up to the challenge. He proves himself again and again. But he has real difficulty admitting to what he's doing, which Rocky does mention, by the way. In real life, that is also something that people deal with. I used to have this problem, not so much nowadays. You will notice that I'm a bit more on the assertive end of personality, let's say. So it's not something that I struggle with anymore. But here I'm talking to you as though I would my bestie. And the reason why I am mentioning my bestie is because she very much has this issue, which is one's perception of self can be really critical, can be really negative. But once you have more perspective, and by perspective, it can literally be either you being able to step back and really objectively look at yourself. And I do put an emphasis on objectively, which is, you know, what I was able to do and why I don't really struggle with as much or at all really nowadays. Or you can gain perspective from other people, which is the case in Project Hail Mary, right? Ryland says he is this, he is this, he is that. And then you see the people around him that think completely differently. They believe in him when he does not, because they see qualities, they see character in him that he does not. Does it mean that he is exactly how he thinks of himself? Of course not. The truth is actually much closer to both of these, both how other people perceive him to be and how he perceives himself to be. So this is a lesson to all of us. What we think of ourselves is not necessarily who we are. And the truth is much closer usually to having a different perspective, one that is removed from the situation. Fact number 3. Well, information number 3 that I want to talk about. The third thing I found really interesting in Project Hail Mary that was portrayed through Ryland Grace was the relationship between connection and identity, connection and purpose. Because when you truly look at it, Dr. Grace only truly grows into himself and who he was meant to be, who he has always been from others' perspective, when he meets Rocky. And through their friendship is when he becomes the man he always was. He was able to really think from a different perspective. He was able to recognize things within himself that he truly hadn't really thought about before. And that was because of Rocky. The amount of growth he was able to go through by being alongside with his new friend was tremendous. And that is also true for real life. Having people in your life that you care for and care for you is life-changing. And surrounding yourself with the right people who will raise you up and pull you up when you're down, and with whom you can grow together, is essential. Whilst he was lost and purposeless at the beginning, Dr. Grace, having Rocky gave him this fuel, this determination, and this purpose of, yes, actually, I'm gonna make sure that Rocky makes it home to his planet and to his mate. That did not exist or come into being in a vacuum. It is because of the relationships we have with others, the connections we build, that we find our purpose. And I will say it was also the case for me. It is only when you get over yourself and get off your own head and start helping other people that you really realize the impact you can have on other people's life and how meaningful that truly is. Fourth fact, or fourth bullet point I want to mention, I guess. This movie was incredibly interesting in terms of explaining how Dr. Grace found his purpose, because his character was really aimless and purposeless at the very beginning, and the purpose he ended up finding was not one of his choosing. That is very interesting because people, when I say people that I know, often, but I have seen this on the internet too, we assume that purpose is just gonna come and grab us, but it's not really how that works. Purpose is something that sometimes you just fall into by accident or that you have no choice over, right? I want to give you a personal example of purpose not really being something that you're like picking out at the supermarket. You're like, this one looks nice. No, it's something that is much deeper, that is much more, it really like grabs at your body and your soul. And you can't just be like, I don't like this one, let's switch it up. Or this is too hard, I'm not gonna do it. It's not how it works. Once you find what it is, you can't really turn away from it. You can't just go for something else. And purpose really shows up in different ways for different people. It can just be being a good brother, a good sister, a good friend, a good parent. Those can be our purposes, right? In my case, I found my purpose when I first started doing hypnotherapy, because I'm a hypnotherapist. You can actually see like my certification right here. I saw how someone like me who had just started could change someone's life so much and help them get rid of something that was really making their life hell. To give you a slightly bit more detail, someone who had, I don't believe they were diagnosed for OCD, but had very similar symptoms. So had big difficulty letting go, or had very big difficulty adapting to things not going their way, and it was just really ruined their relationships and their health. So that was extraordinary when that happened. And I was also able to help my mom go through something health-wise that I did not think I would be able to help whatsoever. And once you have a taste of that, of the change you can make, you can't really go back on what it is. For example, I did try to turn away from this, by the way, which is why I'm saying that, yeah, you can't really turn away because you're going to be fucking miserable. And I went into teaching because it was a more stable, normal job, let's say. Whereas I really knew that I was much more of a creative. I was much more of a, I'm going to work for myself type of person. But I was also, you know, very unsure of whether I would be able to make it or not. And in the end, I ended up burning out because teaching, while I do enjoy it, was not really the type of environment in which I could thrive, and I ended up burning out. But end of the story, your purpose is something that you might not have a choice in. Sometimes you are put in circumstances that make you have to do something that you would have never chosen for yourself. But at the end of the day, you're the only one who can rise up to the occasion. And like Dr. Grace, if he could do it, you can do it too. I guess the moral of the story of this movie is you don't have to feel like a hero to act like one. Grace figured out who he was by doing what needed to be done. And so can you.